Has anybody heard from Miriam? No. Okay. Hopefully everything's okay.
Okay. Just a moment. Okay, everybody, thanks for coming. It is now 6:03, and we call this Montgomery, City of Montgomery Planning and Zoning meeting to be open. So call to order at 6:03. Are there any citizens or visitors that are not on the agenda that would like to make any comments at this time? Dave?
I don't see any. And for the record, I just want to note that Ms. Walker is not an agenda.
Okay. All right, thank you. Item number 1 on the agenda. Oh, and by the way, let me just mention, we're great to see, it's real good to see Bill Simpson back. Appreciate you being here, Bill.
You're welcome.
Bill's got a real history
Forward
to it. Good, good, yeah. Bill's been around for quite a while, most of you probably know him, so it's great. Now, item number 1 on the agenda is consideration possible action regarding the approval of June 1st, 2021 regular meeting minutes. The only thing I had was just a real small typo, Dave, and Allison, you might be able to clarify that. On item 1, page 2, 5th line down, it states Miriam Clark in regards to the property being platted, the final plat, and I think it was Miriam, but not Allison. Okay, it was her last
That's right.
name.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's.
I do copy and paste those names sometimes. Right? So,
That's right. I just want you to know, I read the minutes, okay? All right. We need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes, given the change in request from Jeff.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. And it passes. Item number 2 on the agenda, consideration of possible action regarding approval of the final plat for Town Creek Crossing, Section 1, as submitted by LaFave Development, Inc.
Members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the developer and our city engineer are here. Just a reminder, this is the final plat, so we've seen the preliminary plat, and we've seen the construction markout, so this is the step where we're looking at it for a final time, and then following us, then the city council will look at it. With that, I'll turn it over. If you guys have any questions, certainly the engineers or Jonathan or Bell Squared would be better versed than I to answer those.
And Bill, I know, you know the history even going back, but really for the last 2 years, we've looked at a lot. As everybody knows, of course, with all the elevation, drainage is always looked at.
Right.
And there's been quite extensive, I can tell you that, extensive drainage plans. We went through a period of time when we did look at a lot of the green areas. And as we know, that whole ravine is a major area carries a lot of water.
Right.
And that's just the way it's been forever, even before Lake Conroe. That's just a natural gorge that runs through there. There'll always be major, when we have big events, there'll be a lot of water. So I feel, just not to get into the history, but I feel like engineering has done an extensive job on the drainage.
It's all been approved by the...
Yes, and tonight's really kind of a formality because,
Yeah, it's...
you know, all the other things that were done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's essentially the double checking phase of the preliminary plat, then, then the variances that went along with it for lot width and I believe street width on this one. And then the one we did, for the commercial reserve, just recently. So,
Okay.
so this is really kind of this process, to answer your question, it's, to some degree, it's a ministerial approval in that if the requirements are met, we don't have an option to not approve it, but what this is kind of that final step or last time that we get to have as the city.
Do we anticipate any kind of updates that may be needed in terms of the amount of water that's coming through? Given more roofs, more concrete, more asphalt, because I believe part of that is in the 100-year floodplain in Section 1, and then we have Section 2 coming on board here shortly. And the other question that I had is how much fill dirt is anticipated to be brought in? And number 3, is that a retention pond there towards the bottom by the lift station? I noticed that there was looks like possibly an overflow drain or something that's emptying into Town Creek. So if you can kind of provide some clarification on that, and if you believe that's going to satisfy the drainage needs, because when we have so much water concentrated in that creek, my concern is for the folks that are on the low end of those sections. So
regarding to their plans, so they've done a drainage analysis and they show there's no impact from Section 1 by itself. So obviously this plat is only for Section 1, the development of the lots within Section 1. This doesn't have to do the system approval of construction plans for any of the commercial reserves or anything in Section 2. So to answer your question, as far as there is a little bit amount of 3 lots that are in the floodplain, the very back portion. There's no fill being placed in the floodplain on those 3 lots. So we don't have, John can probably tell you from a construction standpoint, but as far as fill and grading, there was a lot of dirt work on site, but I don't believe there was a whole lot of fill that had to be brought in.
If I may, just for those 3 lots that are in the floodplain, they were actually outside the floodplain by elevation before getting on site. And so we didn't have to mitigate. FEMA has just been, their maps haven't been updated. The part of what we're doing for phase 2 or Section 2 is we are doing another analysis that will actually fix all the floodplain inaccuracies in that area. Some of the work that Philip has done previously by widening the channel, improving the channel, actually drastically reduced the floodplain elevation from what FEMA has them today. So we're continuing to just make sure everything's as accurate as it can be with everything we've done today.
okay. And do you all believe that the storm drains that are in place are sufficient? Okay. And you believe that there's enough capacity under that bridge, given the additional construction that's going to be draining upstream from the bridge? Do you all believe that the bridge will be compromised, given another scenario that we had before?
Not related to this. The amount of water that's coming downstream from outside this development is one thing, but what's coming through the pipe and what's going to the bridge, I don't have any concerns that that's going to cause an issue. So,
Thank you.
Obviously, development upstream has to do their own mitigation and things like that, because we all know the amount of water coming down that stream.
I just give that consideration because it's right there by the bridge, and right there by that lift station. There's a lot of things going on right there in that area down on the low end.
Right.
So it's worth a question from a P&Z board member.
Sure, and just let me run through the plat real quick. So, the process is because I know we have a lot of cases on, because we don't obviously subdivision final plats come to the city. It's just not that frequent. So, they've gone through the preliminary plat process. So that was the first step that y'all saw. Then the construction plans, as they said, came back for approval, and then this final plat. So we actually reviewed them first. So we've been going back and forth for probably 2 months, getting all the comments addressed, and then most recently the variance for the building line, vegetative setback. So all that is on this version that's in your packet. And then the other things that are required kind of at this end step is tax certificates showing that taxes have been paid, is definition of the property, and a plat fee, and then finally a bond. And so what the bond does, and since in this case they're not done with construction, by platting the property, essentially they're in to sell off those lots. And they don't finish construction, theoretically you could have a lot sitting there that's sold without water, sewer, drainage, and streets to it. So that bond is put out with the city, so in that case, if the developer defaulted, the city could call that bond to finish the project under those funds, so it doesn't leave any potential property owners either. So all that's been in place. And actually, the bond they provided was higher than the minimum required. So what is required is for just the amount of construction left, and they provided the whole construction contract.
Is there going to be any impact in any of the construction process as far as traffic that goes through there for, egress and ingress onto that section? There's a lot of traffic that comes through there during the mornings and the evenings after work, now that everybody's going back to work. So do you anticipate anything as far as having to redirect traffic or anything like that coming?
Because of the development?
Yes.
I think, that intersection's got plenty on everyone. Loves are hard about those rings. A significant sign for this is on the county's radar, the city's radar.
Okay.
The intersection's high priority list of getting the roundabout or signal or something to improve the efficiency of that. Because I know, in the evenings, it gets pretty backed up.
Yep.
And so it's ongoing conversations, but again, that's existing today, before you have these homes.
Yeah, and I'm sensing too that that's a good question. Same thing, one of the things we looked at is, I believe it's 3 ways in, 3 ways out of the development.
I think so there's 2 on the Lone Star Parkway and 2 on Buffalo Springs.
Okay, that was it, yeah. So that always is something.
Well, excuse me, 1 on Lone Star Parkway, 2 on Buffalo.
Phase 2
Total of
will give
3.
us a second egress onto Lone Star Parkway.
Yes.
Will the 2 sections be tied in? I noticed there looks like maybe there might be
Yeah, we provide us that to the west. and
across
south.
that drainage easement.
And it'll cross, we'll do culvert there.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And if I can, on section 2, originally, we came to P&Z, and much to Jeff Liddell's horror, we had a high density of values. And
It got
in section 1, we didn't have a lot of trees, but so we had to kind of level the land. Had we stuck with the original plan of doing that section 2, we would have had to mute every tree, we would have had, and so we've gone back and we revised that so that they will be kind of the state lots. And instead of 100, there'll be something like 38.
We'll go back, with the new preliminary plat.
But, so those will be, most of those lots will be 3/4 of an acre.
That'll help a lot.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Much,
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? And thank you for the explanations. That really helps us. Good communication. Okay.
I will move to approve the final plat for Town Creek Crossing Section 1 as submitted.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, unanimous. Thank you. And item number 3 is consideration and possible action regarding the following exterior modifications for 14740 Liberty Street. That's the old China Chapel site. A city-designated historic landmark as submitted by Cornerstone Community Church.
Commission, we've got Mr. Coleman here from the church, and we've talked about this property a couple of times in the past, but just a real quick overview of a city-designated historic landmark is the equivalent of being inside the historic preservation district. So we treat them the same way. There was something on that side, or something about a building on the side that gave it the architectural significance or the historical significance to warrant the city designating it as a landmark. So this The site itself is the historic piece in this case. The building itself is not a, kind of deep age where we're looking at those historic homes. The church has recently bought it, and we're all, I'm sure, familiar with it. It just, it's not in bad repair now on the outside, but I think, largely what they're looking to do is kind of an update of the exterior of the building. And that includes we're going to repaint the building from kind of the off-white now to a white with a black accent. Right now, there are doors on the front of the building. They're going to change those, and I'll let Joe can talk more about his discussions with the fire marshal and that kind of thing. And then the wall sign application, which is kind of that front facade piece again. The sign ordinance itself, or the sign does meet the requirements of the sign ordinance itself. Again, if this wasn't a historic landmark, we wouldn't be looking at any of these modifications. But our thought process should be similar to one that we use, for the historic district. Just keep in mind the context of, kind of what's around the property. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you guys. If you have any questions of me or the applicant, either of us would be happy to answer.
One quick question, Dave. You had mentioned either taking all as one or separately. A, B, and C, I'm assuming we probably could do it as one, but I'm not sure. Number 4 is a separate, okay, number 4 is a separate item. That we need to have a discussion.
Right. So in terms of taking them all together, you could take A and C or A and B and not take C, but I was just talking about for this one item, the variance for the parking surface. That's a separate one.
Right.
We can talk about that one now, but you won't be acting on it until we get to that.
Okay. So let's see. Yeah, we read. I just want to make sure. Why don't we so we've read it, but now we can just go. We'll just go down the line. A, B, C separately. Yeah. That way we know we get all questions. Okay.
Wait, can you clarify what you said about the building? It's a landmark site, not a landmark building, correct?
Without having a written document to go back to, when I was involved with the city at the time, we enacted the historic district ordinance or the historic preservation ordinance. We knew that the site, and in the information that's included, the photos of the old churches were where that building is now. So, kind of as, I think you guys may know more than me now, but the foundation was maybe of the second church, or there's a portion of the foundation that was from original, but essentially the only thing that was left on the site from kind of the historical time frame was just a portion of a slab of a building, essentially. The building itself.
Well, that helps, yeah.
Even when they put the metal building 12 years ago on top of the existing slab, it's not even the exact same shape, which causes some issues too that we're fixing as well.
Okay, that's good to know.
Well, as we get started on this, let me just ask: has everybody had time to stop by? They were looking. Yeah.
Yes.
Good. So, because on something like this, is a good example is to picture it.
So are we taking A, B, and C one at a time?
We can just talk about, any and all of the above, and whenever you guys are ready to, to get to a motion. If you want a separate one for each one, or if you want a couple of them together or all of them together, just however you want to do it. But feel free to talk about, any of these three, either A, B, or C, in any order you want.
So in terms of having the entrance to the church towards the back right, that empties directly onto the parking lot?
That what?
It empties right into the parking lot there on the right. Do you anticipate expanding the parking lot in any way, or no? Okay.
No, from what was existing, no.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the original building, the parking lot was in front also, so it already spilled directly out in the parking lot from the front entrance.
Right, okay. And in terms of, what was your conversation with the fire marshal? Everything?
So when I called them and told him I wanted to be able to move the stage from the side that it was currently on to the other side to let the egress flow better into the inside the building, that we would be closing off one side if we did that. And he said as long as I would move and have emergency doors there at the front south corner of the building, that would be fine.
So you're replacing a window with doors, a door, is that?
I'm sorry.
Are you adding a door to the building then?
We're just
No.
relocating the ones that are already there.
Oh, okay.
Just moving it to another location.
Oh, okay, okay.
And that is I don't see the paint. Is that just a darker tan or?
The darker paint? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the body will be lighter color and the trim will be darker color.
Okay.
So both original buildings were both white in color, and it's just a better look than
Right.
that kind of tan color with a green trim. It just doesn't look that good.
I think your concept really dresses up the look of the property, and yet honors the original historical intent behind it. So I move to approve it as A, B, and C on the wall sign and facade doors and exterior building paint.
And I'm sorry, I just need to mention one thing. The only thought I had, and I know you were going to really have some questions on the fire marshal issue,
Yeah.
is when I went over those two, Tim and Jim, they were talking about a couple things that you had changed or looked at for the back entry. I think it moved one time from what the original. My point is, when we make this motion, I just want to make sure, from a safety standpoint, that something is written down that, we can say, oh, the fire marshal says it's fine, but since we are really making these major changes on that, because I just want to make sure we don't get a situation where somebody's maybe, who knows, storing things in front of the fire exit. So if we can make that part of the motion where we say the final, is there going to be some final?
So we'll have to get a occupancy permit, or fire marshal comes and does the final.
Okay.
That's why I sent the plans to him, or the drawings, really not.
Yes, yes.
And said, here's what we want to do, is this going to be a problem?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, it won't be a problem at all. Even the, what's his name, the inspector that came out with you?
Rick Hanna.
He came out, and I showed him what the fire marshal did. He had no trouble with the egress of it and everything else.
And I know
The biggest thing is having to redo the sidewalks to get them handicap accessible, then they're not
Yeah.
down, some of those things.
My impression is by having it on that, your entrance and exit there on the right side as opposed to the front, with all the traffic that comes in right in front of that door, just on the outside, it makes sense because there's a lot of, you have children, you have vehicles, you have dust, potentially, and traffic and, maybe not being able to hear is good for parents to call their children back because of Harleys going up and down or, traffic on 149. And to me, it made more sense to have the exit there on the right towards the back where, people want to gather at the front door and kids running around. To me, it makes a lot of sense to do that
And we
for
won't have,
safety's sake.
I agree. We won't have parking in front of the main entrance and exit either. So where before, it was immediately in front of the building, but we won't even have it in the new, where we're going to go in and out. It won't be parking in front of that either, so it'll be that less congested there as well.
Yeah, and I'll say, not to get off, but I got there at a good time because those guys showed me, and it's amazing, you don't realize how big that is inside, but everything you're doing makes so much more sense, just the way it flows. So, but my only point is, I know Allison's got a background in insurance, and you've seen what can happen with anything to do with safety or, fire marshal. So, again, it's just because we're making some real changes there, it's just as long as we have confidence to know something's going to be in writing that says these are the, whatever to code, whatever.
That'll all be occupancy.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
Yeah.
They're big boys, I mean, they'll follow the rules, they know what to do, but occupancy permit will take care of that. So we don't need no letter saying we're not gonna stack a box here.
Right.
And it's designated, I mean, it's designated in the floor plan that's been filed. So that occupancy permit would be subject to being reviewed by the fire marshal should that be violated with, materials or decor or anything like that. And so,
You have two sets of eyes on it in that sense, in that the fire marshal will do his inspection as well as the city does our own
Yeah.
certificate of occupancy inspection. We don't inspect the fire code stuff because that's what the fire marshal does. It does give you a little bit of extra certainty knowing that, you're going through two final inspections essentially, for a space in use like this. So with that, I'll either add an amendment or, contingent on compliance with all building codes as applicable, or we leave it the way it is, but either way.
Yeah, I take that, I think we're fine. We can go with that original motion.
Yeah, I second that motion then.
thank you.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 It's unanimous, the ayes have it. Thank you. And now moving on to number 4 on the agenda is consideration and possible action regarding a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to City Council on a variance to Section 78-96B of the City Code requiring all parking lots to be paved with asphalt or concrete.
Members of the commission, obviously same project or same site, we're just talking about a different side of the, kind of the redevelopment of the property. As I'm sure that you all know, the parking lot has historically always been a gravel parking lot. The ordinance requires some type of either, again, it can be asphalt or concrete. The city has given variances in the past to, one, I think the golf course, the putt-putt place was 6 or 7 years ago. It was an ongoing thing for a while. Others, more recently, was an alternative to it because it was an engineered system that was designed to hold some stormwater and have some other benefits. That there was kind of a purpose-built, design that was an alternative to what the ordinance requires. I put a little bit in here about what we have to do in terms of the variance. What the Planning and Zoning Commission will be doing, will be making a recommendation to the City Council, so the decision won't be here tonight, but rather it'll be your recommendation to the City Council, who then at their next regular meeting will consider the variance. They'll consider your opinion along with the city engineers to make a final determination on it. But with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Again, we've got the applicants here, we've got the city engineers here. For what it's worth, the city engineer did recommend approval of it, and city staff didn't recommend approval of it. It's an unfortunate spot with where they're at in the redevelopment and reuse, of the property, but because it was always gravel, at some point needs to be brought up to our, to what the city ordinances, ask for. So
I can see if they were going to add to or make larger.
And that's the reason. I mean, I didn't ask for a variance of just a blanket. I asked for a time period.
Yeah, I wish
We're in
I-
the process of the southern neighbor is considering themselves as a third of an acre. And it would just make better sense to do them both at one time. We want it to be a solid surface. We plan for it to be a solid surface.
Yeah, that's, I mean, if that's where I have with everything we've given away here lately, something like this, I wish on your application you would have put monetary hardship. It would have made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I know, and that's why let me just interrupt you, Bill, for a second, because I think it's important for us to have a good conversation here, very objective, both sides, because of the history, because over the last, I think it was, can you clarify, 2006, I think I read when this ordinance was put in. or some, it's been a long time. So,
You know, the subdivision.
I saw that
where it comes from, so it's. you know,
For paving,
it's,
yeah.
You know, various iterations, but
And the reason I mention that is only because since that period, since that time, we've done quite a few. I know you went around and did a count of 8 or 10 that are existing crushed granite or stone of some kind. Some of those go way back, but there's maybe 4 or 5 that we've approved since then. And here's my thoughts on it. You know, I know there's 2 ways to look at these kind of things. You can say, well, if we let one do it, they can all do it. That's not, I don't think that's the case here, because I do think we have to look at the location, the situation, and how it fits. But I understand there's 2 sides to it for sure. I'm glad that you put in 3 years and maybe then take another look at it. And if you're going to expand, if you do well. Of course, we've always been told you can't make any decisions on monetary, economic.
That's the reason I put it in there.
No,
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. I mean,
well, that's the reason why developers get smaller lots.
Yeah, it said that it wouldn't be the only
That's-
way, at least the way I read it, it wouldn't be the only reason.
Am I right, Chris?
You approve or deny it would be a hardship, but I guess it can be considered, but it's not going to be based upon that.
yeah. Well, what I mean is nobody can say because I can't afford something and, give me a break. It doesn't work that way.
Well, that's what the golf course was.
Partly, but
No,
part of that discussion was just what looks right with fern land across the street.
no, he did a variance because he could not afford an asphalt parking lot.
Well, that was part of the conversation, yes. I guess what I'm saying is we've got fern land, we've got Hodgepodge Lodge that came to us with a special way to do an impervious surface. The city in general is looking for less runoff, the better. If you stand there at the church, you look across the street, that's all rustic and dirt driveways. So there's that side of it. For the area, it looks right. It's been like that forever. Maybe 3 years down the road, then if they're doing well and want to expand it, that would be a way to go. But I do feel like we've got so many places, CNS feed store, Phil's, even parts of Phil's Roadhouse. We've got a lot of parts that have that old look, and the city does embrace that. We if it was the Woodlands, we'd say, hey, everything's got to be paved. But we have these areas that still look like the country, and to me, people have said, I wouldn't want to see blacktop fern land. If I drove in there and that was all blacktop, it would shout out at me. It wouldn't look right, And after everybody looked at the golf, the mini golf, they said, well, and that is an objective. That's something we can all look at for any case and say, if it's a recreational, low, kind of a casual kind of thing, then it somehow
We're twisting the ordinances around that.
No, we're being, here's my point. The reason we have, people think variances are a dirty word. They're not. There's nothing, there's a reason to have variances. It's so that everybody can look at something and say, yes, that works in that location. You have to look at it and, in other words, evaluate it. But just because we do it there doesn't mean we do it.
But this is an existing gravel parking lot. This isn't the golf course where it's a full new construction.
Mm-hmm.
And we gave them a variance for how many years?
it was for 6 months at a time.
6 months.
Yeah.
And there's still a gravel parking lot.
Right.
Somehow, if we give them variance, there's got to be enforcements on the variances somehow. I don't know how we do it. But that was new construction.
Right.
This is existing gravel. They're not making it, now, if they were going to make it bigger, yes.
Yes.
Okay, because it's new now.
Right.
This has been there for how many years? That's,
64, they built that church now was built in 64. So,
I think a couple things just to kind of point out some differences here. So with the mini golf, one thing that they do have is they have paved handicap spaces and walkways for the mobility, and paved a driveway. So in the food truck park, the one down here, that just recently got the variance, is what Dave said, is that they have a paved driveway and kind of drive aisle, and then they have the parking lot with the true grid system kind of paver all in place. In this case, we are talking about an addition to the parking area.
No, sir.
We're not, I thought we were expanding.
Originally, when we first started talking before we bought the building back in February, March,
Right.
we were talking about expanding the parking lot to the north side of the road as well.
Right.
Scratch that.
So-
we're only looking at the south side and the front, which has been parking lot for ages.
So are you adding, was it bringing in more ground just to kind of set the base that you had?
So when they brought, so the big gravel for ages.
Right.
I don't know how many years ago, 10, 12 years ago, I'm assuming when they built the building, they brought in more gravel. They actually put it too high to the right of the building. It just needs to be regraded, and you can actually, if you drive by there now, you'll see right along the park. I mean, we also do have flat work, kind of like the golf place does as well. But along that, I actually graded where you thought was grass, it's all rock under there right now, just to get the drainage of water away from the building. So basically regrading what is already there, maybe bringing in a few loads of top dressing just to pretty it all up when it's done.
And if I'm looking at the picture right, the egress off of 149 is blacktop or concrete at this time into the parking lot. Am I correct?
In the circle drive area, it was ages, I mean, it's still pretty, I mean, it's got holes in it and stuff, but it was asphalt.
Can we redo that?
In the curb only.
Can we do that?
So there's two, I mean, I will be flat out honest with you, there's two reasons why I'm asking for the variance. One, I got the engineer to actually look at it and say, what's the bid on designing a parking lot? Because I was told I needed to have plans. And it was $25,000. Well, I got a bid on doing the asphalt on everything up top, existing space, not new, for 30 grand. And it's like, I'm gonna pay an engineer just to draw me, oh, it's okay to do this for 25 grand when the whole thing costs 30. If that would have came up, we probably would have the money just to do it.
Right.
But then there is the option that we're considering right now, getting the other third of an acre. So then it would make absolute sense if we're adding to the property to do the full-blown survey with an engineer and everything, because we'll be expanding the parking lot. And we'll do it at that time. And then the parking lot, instead of costing 30, it'll probably cost 60,
Right.
plus the engineer.
Right.
Are you
And that
keeping,
can come down the road if we buy the property, but if we don't, I mean, I would be, good, go ahead.
are you keeping the two driveway, the circular pattern?
Currently, yes.
Okay.
If we were to buy the other property, then I would want to move the northern exit up to get it off the side of that hill where it's kind of dangerous.
Meaning south?
I'm sorry, yes, south.
Okay.
But yes, that northern end of the horseshoe, it really drops off, and it's quite narrow, and that's where, I was glad to see you say you're going to come in with some dressing, because it does need to be
Oh, it does.
re-dressed and packed in and smoothed out, so. But
Absolutely. And like I said, we want to bring in, all solid surface, the existing, not anything new. That kind of threw a kink in it. I'm sure that's what somebody might be looking back from what I sent Dave back in February, March, where we were talking about adding another parking lot on the south side or north side. No, we're not.
But what I'm asking, just to verify that picture, above the culverts in the ditch, those two approach pads in and out that circle are, it's existing asphalt or concrete? Okay.
Aged. Yep.
And what I would like to do in the initial stages is for the two handicap areas to actually go and do asphalt on those.
You probably,
I mean, I would love to. If that's what we would prefer to do. I just don't want to have to go a $25,000 survey in the middle of whether we buy the extra place or not. So just trying to kick the can down the road a little bit before we do it correctly. If you wanted to approve it to where we did the handicap asphalt and the circle, that's fine, because that's what we want to do anyway.
Do we need to word a variance if approved, do we need to word a variance that it's only for the period of time until another property is purchased adjacent? I mean,
Yes.
once that's done, that variance ends, and we need to see an engineering plan, and we need to see egress, and handicap spaces and how it ties into any sidewalk or we need to see that. But
And I think that's a good point, because you mentioned.
If the additional park property is purchased.
yeah,
it needs to
and moving
come
your
back to you.
entrance and your exit and all that.
That
I
would
mean,
be great,
because
if that's the plan, I mean, that's what we want.
Because that way we would have enforcement to take away the variance at that time period.
Have them, if they keep it within the 3 years or the property purchased to the south of them.
Yes, yes.
When I was looking at this section of the code, I was looking at the applicability of this chapter to this property, and from what I read, it applies to any new construction or enlargement of existing structures or dimensions. That would be if they were increasing the size of the parking lot or the building, then they would have to comply with current city code. And I don't think that applies in this case.
That is what that's, because I pulled that up also.
Right.
That is,
And so I don't think they need a variance if all they're going to do is, bring in, gravel.
pre-existing.
Yeah,
Pre-existing.
to update,
I mean, you have definitely stated you're not expanding it, it's the same size.
From what's on it's the south side and in front of the building, they were both parking lots before, and still are, and he put, when Mr. Easley bought it 2 years ago, he put a couple flower beds on top of the parking area in front of the building, but it won't be, it'll be in the front of the building and to the south of the building, which is existing.
And you guys have noticed that some of the material is migrated over time, and you need to pull it back up and put your crown back and all that? Okay.
Yeah. And that's very important, because that keeps it safe and walkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're saying I don't need variance right now?
I'm not a lawyer. That was just my reading and interpretation of the
I
statute.
mean, that is what we're doing, I just didn't read it that far, I would have already cried.
So that's
So right now, Dave, right now, like with this here, and they're saying 3 to 5 years, or once they buy the new property with a stated amount of time after that. Is there any type of, what am I trying to say, penalties to the property that does not adhere by that, or we just say, oh, well,
There's, certainly some on the, just the general provisions of, so the steps we would take was if we, let's say, they don't purchase the property, so 3 years is the time that we come back to look at this.
right.
And in 3 years, you guys either have the option then to, or the city council will go through the same process where the P&Z will make a recommendation to council, and council will decide along with the engineer's opinion. But if in 3 years we said, okay, you need to comply, they said, no, we're not ready to comply, and we say, too bad. We gave you 3 years if you need to.
But what could you do, pull their occupancy permit, or?
Practically not. You would cite them under a code enforcement action and let it play out just through the general provision
Okay.
of, I think it's section 113 of the city code, which is just kind of the general provisions where if an ordinance doesn't have a specific penalty listed in it, you just default to the general.
Okay, I got you.
So there is a recourse, method again, in the practical sense, we're not going to go, pull a CO, from someone based on the, a parking lot surface. It would just be a, again, a code enforcement, action. But again, it should be that, it's going to be resolved either through another, extension of the variance or another variance essentially, or, they've complied, they've submitted the plans and the drainage and all that good stuff that goes along with the development plan.
I do have one question. Is the north side of the property buildable?
guess anything's buildable. I mean, they build in Colorado, but it would take a whole lot more dirt work.
It drops off.
Do you have a growth plan in place? that property?
We would like to, if we grow, actually on that back wing, if you kind of envision the building, it's T-shaped, kind of the back left or the back north, expand back about 20 or 30 foot for another classroom. Yeah, I mean, it would take, really, you're only talking about 20 or 30 foot, so you'd probably 8 or 9 loads of, dirt to get it to elevation there. Unless we did it like they did and actually pour, which I wouldn't, I don't like the way they did it. The way that they did that 3 or 4 foot wall there. Actually, I would like to bring in some dirt and make that a more gradual deal and get that safety hazard off of that. But to answer your question, yes, it's absolutely buildable. I mean, to 20 to 30 foot down the side, and we wanted to expand that way.
My name is Ralph. I'm the pastor. So yes, but we are not a church who expects to get mega. We have a cap on how many we want, and then we'll plant another church somewhere else. So we do not anticipate ever having to add on to the main portion of it. It would just be for classrooms.
No classrooms, nothing beyond a classroom.
Nothing beyond classrooms in the back.
So the parking you have now on there will facilitate your facility
For 3 years.
for 3 years, okay. All right. There
And
won't
then
be
at that point-
parking.
And that's why the contingency of buying the property to the north
Right.
would allow us to grow into what we would expect to be our complete.
So you
growth.
have
The
a,
most you can be at that
all right,
point.
so you have a plan,
We do have a plan.
okay.
Yes.
What is the occupancy of that church? Or will it?
I was talking to, I think it was Mr. Ham. I think it was him or it was the fire marshal, one of those two guys. And they were going through the building, the bathrooms, the parking area, and they were saying 150 to 170.
Okay.
Right now we're 40 to 50. So we-
And do you know if the city has a parking requirement for
That's what we
religious
were going
facilities?
off of.
Oh, okay.
is, how many handicap spots it took. Maybe you and I were talking about how many handicap spots per person. And it was gonna have to be at least 2, but we were talking about doing 3 on top, just do 3 to further growth. But yeah.
Okay.
Right, so normally you would look at that, it'll give you, I don't recall institutional because we don't deal with it as much, but I think it tracks, a commercial, which is just kind of a really, blanket.
Is it 4 spaces per
It's a
square, 100 square
fraction
foot, or 1,000 square feet, or whatever?
Of the square footage.
I can't remember the exact number, but
You need
it's
0.75, or you need 75% of your building square footage in your parking lot square footage.
Okay.
And then you divide that total square footage by 162, I think, which is a 9 by 18 space. So you have to have that many, kind of say if you had, so you had, 16,000
Square feet.
square foot of building, so you divide that by 100, if my math is right, you need 160 spaces.
Okay.
So then we divide that by the 162, and we say, okay, you need those 100 spaces, plus all your drive aisles and stuff.
And do we know if the existing gravel area accommodates what the parking requirement would be?
I don't.
Off the numbers you just said, it does.
It does?
So the building's 3,900 square feet, so you're looking at approximately 35 to 39 spaces or whatever.
Okay.
And that's about what it is when you factor in the front and the south side.
Okay.
The existing.
Okay.
And just for a little more information, you were in a high school for quite a long time. You
We've
were
been in the Montgomery High School auditorium now for 2 years.
Yes, okay. And it's definitely youth-oriented, so most of your people are young or?
No, we're young, old.
Oh, okay. Well, I remember at the other location you were looking at, there was some talk about being able to place for the youth to come in
Yes.
and have beverages and hook up to Wi-Fi.
Sure.
That's still part.
So we will, one of our target places is Lincoln, to work with that school. We understand some of the demographics and the things that are involved with that particular school, so that's kind of on our range to be a part of that school. But also, I have 2 kids in Montgomery High School, so offer a place for them to be able to hang out and have their friends as well. So, yeah.
Great.
I assume that your hours based on, would be similar to what you were talking about before over in the shopping center?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And also, just because we always talk about drainage, I know everything drains to the north and to 149, nothing towards that neighborhood behind you.
Right.
So we're good there. Love the logo. I think that Cornerstone logo is a great look to it. So like Bill said, I think the whole thing, we agree everything looks good paint-wise and all of it. So we need to get back to where we were. That's very astute about the original ordinance. It is in there. So to keep this simple, do we want to consider making note to that? I know you want you made a good point. When we make a recommendation to City Council, we want to be thorough. I mean, we need to explain why we're at. So should we reread that right now, that ordinance, and confirm?
Yeah, I believe what the ordinance for the variance,
Yeah.
we need to put that in there.
It's section 78-4, item 3 on there. It's the applicability of the chapter. This chapter shall govern every person owning any tract of land within the corporate limits of the city. And then item number 3, it's applicable if they develop any tract or parcel of land unless said tract or parcel of land has been previously subdivided and platted. No, that's not where I was going with that. Let's see. 7-4, number 3.
It's 78-96 A and B. All development shall provide sufficient, that's all. Any parking lots, drives, excluding family, shall be paved and no, that's different.
Oh, yeah. Okay, hang on. So, so that was that's the applicability of the chapter, right? So then I went back to the definitions of what development meant. And it says, development means the man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate, including, but not limited to, the new construction or the enlargement of any exterior dimensions of any building or structures, excluding landscape structures, dredging, filling, grading, pavement, excavation, clearing, or subdivision of the property.
So it sounds like they met a few of those criteria you made along the way.
Yeah, but I'm not a lawyer, but that is just my reading of the code.
And what is that?
That is in the definitions within section 78. 78-1. You'll find the definition of development, which I went to after reading what this chapter applied. Like, it said it applies to new development, so I said, well, what qualifies as development?
Well, when we make the motion, we could refer to that.
We could refer to that and also make sure we put in there what their stipulations that they stated, not to exceed 3 years, or if prior to the 3, you purchased the property to the south.
Yeah, I'm fine with all of that. But I have to say, especially since Dave was talking about that city council engineers or whatever had already been leaning towards a no, if it's in there where we don't need that, I'd say let's just scrap the request altogether. And we're not, until we change something, then we'll come back to you. Like if we buy the extra land, well, then we know we're going to have to add parking lot to it. So then I have to come to you. But if it's reading like Brittany is saying, then I don't think we need to request anything, and I'll have to go before city council.
I'll just say this, it would be nice if we can keep it simple. They might need to take a little time to review that ordinance And we understand, you know, we really, from an engineering standpoint, we understand that side of it. I mean, that there's times when you just have to, you do pavement, so.
I don't see from staff's perspective, and I won't speak for the engineers on this, but I wouldn't look at this project and not call it development. And I don't think there's any other way to.
You wouldn't what?
That I would not look at this and not consider them developing the site.
Right.
I believe this chapter, you know, does apply to them.
Right.
When you take an old, you know, vacant church that's seen a couple of uses here and there, and you turn it back into a church, you're developing that. The clearing that they did on the site, you know, we're talking, you know, right now about doing parking lot work, you know, whether it be asphalt or graded or not, we're talking about this because they're doing those very specific things. And even if, you know, because the definition doesn't refer to the, you know, to the reuse or repurposing, you know, of a building, I would still, you know, believe that they are doing development on the site, the chapter does apply to them. And, you know, I can certainly go to the city attorney and ask them. I will say the issue with pulling this, I would caution you not to pull it and just not take any action, because if what I believe is going to happen is, no, they'll have to go through with it, and we'll just have to start the process over. So that's.
No, I think we need to vote on this particular thing tonight, and then pass that on, then whatever happens at that point happens to that point. But no, there's no sense right now trying to go around something and cause a bigger problem later on.
Yeah, and we don't want to have to go all the way back, move back again.
Right,
Redo.
right. We need to address the issue tonight right here on this.
It also gives a support in your growth plan.
I'm sorry?
By doing this tonight,
Yeah.
it also provides parameters and objectives towards your growth plan.
And that's why we want solid surface. I mean, it's not like we don't plan on doing it. I just don't want to have to keep coming to these meetings if it's something that it's not really a real issue unless we buy the other property or we're getting ready to apply for the parking lot permit.
Your meeting quantity is going to go down significantly, though, now that you have your own property.
Okay.
So you're not having to figure out how to lease and turn something into what you need temporarily. So, I mean, logic, common sense says you have a home now, right?
Yeah.
So,
Chris, can I ask you, I know that you were addressing the commission and saying that you don't recommend approval on this item, but I think you were under the impression that they were expanding the parking area. Would you still?
I would still agree with Dave on its development. So it's
Even if
development
it's resurfacing?
of the tract, because it includes, you know, grading, paving, excavation, clearing. So no, they're not paving. There was clearing. There is grading on the site. So I think, you know, definitely the argument is less now that it is a small. We're using the same footprint, but I still am with Dave that it is a development or redevelopment of a site.
So anytime anybody grades something, they're going to have to redo the parking lot?
From a commercial standpoint.
Yeah, and
So what the city did on their side of the community center, if they regrade that, basically the city needs to pave it?
Yes.
Well, they graded it a couple of times.
I mean,
I mean,
we get to the parking area and the Lutheran church, so like they added the parking area, that went through the plans and permits.
well, I understand that, if they add a parking area, I definitely agree on that.
Right. You know, when you take it in totality of the improvements around the site that dictate, if it was only, the only thing being changed was the parking lot, but there's more development of that site going on.
plus there's drainage.
The building.
There's additional, that is a sensitive area for drainage to run off. I mean, it contributes to a drainage basin that's taxed
Town creek.
already, yes.
Well, for
And
what?
I'm sorry?
For what?
for
You know, the drains into Lake.
for enlarging the parking
They're
lot.
not enlarging the parking lot.
At some point, they may.
Oh, yeah, that's what this.
That's what I'm saying,
That's-
is that
that's-
drainage is, also goes towards that
At that
development
point.
definition.
At that point, correct.
Clarify something on the size of the parking lot is, it may not get, there may not be a new section of parking lot, but we're already talking about adding parking lot back. I mean, I know that they referred to, well, there used to be a parking lot in front of the building. Well, the reality is, for the past couple of years, there hadn't been a parking lot in front of the building, but that's what they're asking for tonight. They found other areas that were grown over, but there's some, there is some gravel under there. So, not to be cynical, but expect this parking lot to get as big as it can possibly get without getting any bigger. One of the issues that you're going to have, and at least one of the points that I get, reluctant on a variance is because what we're doing is we're not going to ask them for any development plans. We're not going to ask them for drainage plans, which was part of what the $25,000 quote would have been. It would have been for the engineering design, but it would have included, hey, here's the runoff that's coming off of this site, and here's what we're going to do to mitigate it. There would have been a buffer shown where an institutional lot, adjoins the single-family residential lot there to the south. Instead, the parking lot's going to go up to the property line. So when we say we're not making it bigger, we may not be planning a new section of parking lot, but the parking lot's going to get as big as it can possibly get where it sits right now. Is it 20%? Is it 10%? Is it 35%? I don't know, but in terms of getting bigger, it's not staying the exact size it was on the day that they closed. And so, again, that's why I do believe that the point holds true. It is getting bigger, and that is development of the site, whether or not you're, using engineers to do it or not, or just, some guys with some tractors and some dump trucks. That's the big, fundamental difference here between the variance and no variance, is what steps you take to get there.
Well, I think we really have covered the points, and I think the thing that really helps us pull this together in the motion is that it looks like they're hopefully going to expand, and if we can put a time limit to 3 years where we have a way to say, that's it, when we look at it again, that probably does work in the real world, because I know the point is we always want to make sure we have teeth in something to be able to go back and enforce, So, again, I'm just repeating what was stated here.
If it's for 3 years, I mean, that's all the teeth you really need. I mean, you don't have variance after that. If you don't have a variance, you're out of compliance.
So my original statement holds true. That grant a variance for the gravel parking lot for the time being until such point as the adjacent property is developed in addition, to tie into this, and then, or within 3 years. And then, or any changes to entrance or exit of the existing property.
I think if you guys move to recommend an approval and we go down, I would think about where we want to put the point, what happens at 3 years? Is it starting plans for a parking lot in 3 years, or do you expect to see a complete set of plans submitted in 3 years?
Well, if he's buying the property, a lot of that depends on whether or not the property adjacent is purchased or not.
Right.
However, a variance, if the parking lot is developed on the existing parcel as it exists now, in terms of expanding, the edges or re-leveling or putting a crown in, or going to the property line as they've discussed, then
It's already to the parking lot, to the
yes,
property line.
it's already there.
So I was going to address that, but since you brought it up again, I have to. If y'all can come over anytime you want to, from the property line, the block goes up to the property line. The southern neighbor let the previous church mow past the line and park on it. I asked her if I could clear out the front to make it safer to pull out because the city is not clearing, it's not staying clear to the backside of the ditch and it's really dangerous. And she's like, oh, if you're gonna do that anyway, do you mind clearing even some more for me? I'm like, I don't mind, I'll clear your stuff. So I haven't cleared anything on our property on the south side. It was all cleared for her and the right of way of hers, not us. On the north side, I might have cleared 5 foot of bushes that were head high to get to that property line. So as far as like doing much clearing on our property, I have not. And the existing parking lot does go to the southern line of our boundary already. It's just when you look at it, you think, oh, well, it goes further, that's not our property.
So again, I would just point out, kind of, what we want to, let the applicants know what the expectation is in 3 years, I guess, is it, to let them know, do you expect to see, or would your recommendation to council be that you expect a set of plans?
I would like to see within that 3 years, not coming to 2 years and 364 days, a set of if, well, no matter if you buy the property or not.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And maybe you can answer. With it being a historical site, what are the parameters on changing the site itself from what it was? Are there requirements for what you can and cannot do on a historical site?
Just outside of what these guys approved, there's really not, outside of a vague, it needs to be in general conformity with the historical nature of the city. I realize that's a broad word, but some things that would help your case would be to tie, site-specific events or, something out of the historical narrative, to what your future plans are. If you were going to come and say, I want to build this new building, on this site, and here's how this ties in to the history of the site, they're probably going to be more receptive.
Right.
Because there's nothing in an ordinance that says if it's a historical site, you can only do these things.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of the parking lot, the city seems as though they want everything paved with either concrete or asphalt, which is not in line with a historical site. So it just seemed, I was just wanting clarification on what constituted a historical site and what you can do with the facility, because if you concrete that whole thing, which is what the city sounds like they don't want, if you're gonna have a parking lot, then it no longer holds any value of historicity to it. You just redone the whole thing, because you're gonna have to clear out that whole south side. That thing's gonna have to be just totally mown down in order for it to heat for drainage and all that purpose. So,
Unless P&Z grants another variance for extending a gravel parking lot.
And again, remember that the city has approved variances for engineered gravel parking lots
Yep.
of a system that has a plan. So the question here, this is not that. This is a normal gravel parking lot. And one thing to know about the size of the parking lot is we refer to, when you look at your last sheet in your packet, you see how the aerial is laid out on page 43. So this is probably a 2021 aerial from MCAT. And then you go to the survey on sheet, 2 sheets earlier, excuse me, that shows the parking area, and it is a larger area than what is there today. And because as they noted regarding taking out the flower beds and things of that in front of the church. So it again, kind of leads to the enlargement point of what it is today and what it is when they purchased the property. Maybe at some time in the past there was gravel underneath, but there is an enlargement of what is there today with the flower beds and planters in front of the building to what is, at least according to this exhibit that was submitted, a larger area, which is again kind of why, and maybe that's, this was a high-level drawing on a survey that was marked. If the intent is that it stays more like, this shape, that it's not changing, again, it kind of gets to that whole, point of what is development. This is not the first time that the city's come to this point of is this developing a tract? And at what point when it changed in the past, does it flip? Because if there was gravel there before, now they're putting it back to gravel, well, who made the development change?
Can you work with them in the event they decide they want to pursue a gravel system? I mean, is that something that they could
We
execute?
really don't. We don't want solid surface.
You don't, you
We
want solid?
surface
Yeah.
because we want to have a place where these kids can come over and have a basketball goal and have things where they can do outside that isn't rock and filled over with grass. We don't want that at all.
Don't want people tripping when they get out of it. We want that. I mean, when I talked to Dave in February or March, he told me call Wild, it was, you know, he gave me a ballpark of what it would cost, and it was 5 times more than what we were thinking. And then the lady came up about possibly selling us more, and it's like, you know what? Let's not do this yet until we see if we're going to get the other, or then we get some more money to be able to come up with this $20,000+ survey deal or engineer survey.
So by doing a variance and wording it like you're talking about, Bill, that would match their growth plan and provide the enforcement capability that we need at times, that we forget, you know, in the city to leave that. Don't do away with the enforcement capability of the ordinance.
Right.
I would welcome that in the work. As elders over our church, we would welcome that wording in there to hold us accountable for that, because we want to raise the standard for which things are done, not lower them. So we would welcome that.
And to get back to your original point, is there a historic marker? I know the building's not considered historic, but is there a marker?
There's a marker on the facility right now
Okay,
that we intend to incorporate with the new way of doing some things.
right, that was kind of, I think you alluded to that would be a great thing as you move forward to bring in that.
You've seen how they do the historical monuments on the side of the road and stuff. Well, you've attached pictures of the 2 original buildings and how you can do like a black and white enamel kind of picture. So kind of like not a monument, because it's not going to be huge, but something when the kids from the community come and they take a picture of this historical site, because, you know, the school does their little deal when they come around, they can actually see the picture of the building as it was, and then they can read all the stuff that's on the marker today. Like, I watched 75 people drive in and take pictures, you know, and I heard multiples complain about, this is not a historical building, you know, and they were missing the whole point of it. And I think if they had pictures of the original building and the explanation.
That would make it clear, yeah, that would be great.
So we're planning on doing that, just to keep a little bit better history there than what it is, because it's obviously not a historical building, but the site is very historical.
Exactly. And that's a great history, back to 1865, I think.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Wow. Well, good questions. All right, so I think we kind of.
Bill, you want to word it?
Brittany, you have a word.
I think you got it in your head, right?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
It's all mumble jumbo.
Go for it.
Coach Overton here, nobody will understand me.
You understand.
Item number 4. What do I do? What is it?
Make a motion.
I make a motion.
Yeah. It's been a while.
It has been a while, that's what I'm saying.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I make a motion to issue a variance or consideration to, I guess, City Council to issue a variance to keep the existing parking lot at, what do we call this? There's no name on here.
14740 Liberty.
14740 Liberty Street,
Yes.
the old China Chapel site, to remain, the existing parking lot to remain gravel with a few touch-ups, not to exceed 3 years. We'd also like to see some, maybe after a year, and going into year between 2 and 3, to see what you have planned. Also, if the property to the south is purchased by y'all, then that changes the whole variance into surface parking lot for both areas.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does that make sense?
It also should include any changes to the front entrance and exit to the property as it stands now.
Well, that would be,
Plan we have to submit.
Yeah.
yeah, that would be part of it. If they changed from the circle to somewhere else, then you're
Because he was
changing
talking
your
about
development,
moving
yeah.
one of those entrances further
Right.
south.
Yeah, well, that's if you buy
If you
the,
buy the other.
right, because that would be ODOT, I mean, TxDOT at that point.
Text it.
Yeah.
I'll second your motion.
We have a second.
All right.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous, the ayes have it. And thank you for all the input.
Yeah, thank you very much for
Yes.
being here and going the proper route.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Before we adjourn, I would like to just have a brief, I have a question for Dave under a commission inquiry. And I don't know, this could either come on, either we need to put it on an agenda possibly for city council, or maybe we can just do this as a punch list kind of maintenance thing. Bill alluded to it, the old community center where on the north side where we did the parking with the crushed stone, gravel, that contractor went out of business, he's left the area. I think he was supposed to come back and do it more of a topsoil or a finer grit on the top. Over the last couple of years, it's changed a little bit. It's settled. And I think you're probably all aware of that. And I just guess we need to talk about what's the plan there. Either we need to come back over it with a finer top dressing and really pack it in, just like what we're talking about for the church. Because we have witnessed people turning an ankle or getting out of the car there. It's very rough. So
Something I can definitely mention, the public works guys right now, we don't want to do anything too long-term on it, just because we're still filing up our plans. We've got some, it's actually true, the downtown plans, so we can certainly appreciate and understand kind of how those plans grow. There's times where you're in certain plans. But, so as we, look to the downtown plan, that will obviously be, one of the areas that we look at, changing the surfacing on. But in the interim, just making sure we don't have any trip hazards or something like that.
Yeah, they need a variance for that.
Maybe we can do that with our city works guys, even if it's just raking it or something. I don't mean to be an alarmist, but it just, I think that contractor was gonna come back, but they never really did that final.
And I didn't know that we didn't do it in-house ourselves.
Yeah.
To be honest.
It was a local guy who lived in our neighborhood, but he's gone. So, but during the water park fun festivities on Saturday, we saw a lot of action over there, and it gets a lot of use. So that's
I got one thing. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Chris, in your spare time, I don't know if any of this makes sense.
Yes.
Like on the flood zone or the flood drawings, what, is there somewhere that tell me what zone X and zone AE and what that means?
Yes.
Can you,
I can send that over to you.
okay, or just issue it through Dave and he can,
And now you put it as far as, I think it's 100-year, 500-year floodplain, they just call it different things.
yeah,
Floodway.
because like there's zone X shaded, zone AE, and there's a bunch of different, just so, I guess I was neglected to ask that many years ago, but just going over this again, I'd like to know what those, what can't be put in those.
I'd like to know more about, Jeff is praising the drainage plan that's been studied and approved and all of that, but I have no background. I have background in reading that, but I have no information. And that area is being developed upstream. And so the decisions that we make now may not come to roost until further development. And to be able to have a better idea about the drainage design would really provide a lot of perspective in terms of what our responsibility is when the chickens come home to roost in the event of storm. And so, and I've asked for that in the past informally, but now I want to be on record that I'm asking for it.
We'll be glad to supply you with it.
Thank you, I
And
appreciate that.
one other thing, Chris, and maybe David, when Ms. Lefebvre widened, dredged, or whatever that, down through his property there, did he get approvals from the Corps of Engineers, or did he just do all that on his own?
My understanding is he got approved.
He did?
He had discussions with the board.
Okay.
He didn't submit any plans or drawings on that, it was all done on private property. But he has stated that it was done in accordance with the court. And then when they submit the changes for the map revisions, that'll be apparent because the changes he made to the channel are part of the improvements that help offset the drainage from the properties.
From the properties. One thing they're dredging that canal, or trying to dredge it. I think it fills up as quick as he's dredging it. Whose responsibility is that if they get that all dredged and we get another 3 or 4 day flow like that and that fills back up again, not only fills up again to keep it restricting that way, but affects everything upstream? Is the city responsible for that, or is the property owner?
So it's, and we've had this discussion, not just in this case, but in many other areas where there's a public drainage easement that gives the city the right to go in and make changes, but not the responsibility.
Okay.
The underlying property owner is still responsible.
Okay.
So it's not a city accepting a channel and taking over maintenance. It's still the property owner's responsibility.
Okay.
The property owner or the subdivision?
Property owner. So the
Okay.
underlying property owner of that channel, or channel creek stream.
I mean, he'll still, basically, he's sold the property, but he still owns
That's correct.
the drain,
So in this case, when he sells the lots, he will still own the commercial reserves.
Okay.
Until he either deeds those over to the MUD or to an HOA or to someone else. But that will never be deeded over unless the city takes, specifically there is action, the city has to specifically take action to accept. So he can't just say, this is your drainage channel, it's now, the city would have to take action, and say, we are accepting this drainage channel, is our responsibility.
Okay.
So even though, like on his plat, we have an easement that covers the entire area, that just gives us the right and not the responsibility.
Right. Okay, great. All right, thank you. That's all I got. I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.